Good morning. So one of the videos that I noticed had a lot of traction over time was relationship boundary examples. I think when people talk about boundaries, and if you've struggled with this and been a people pleaser, the first thing you might think is, I don't even know where to start. Like, what are boundaries? What are things that create friction and tension within me that impact my relationship? A lot of people don't know where to start, and that makes a lot of sense. So today I'm going to go through some examples. And as you listen to these, I want to encourage you to think about, are these things that I feel any sort of tension with myself about, with my relationship? I mean, usually when we're thinking about our relationships, it's really about sometimes being frustrated with ourselves, sometimes being frustrated about the ways that we are showing up in the relationship and the ways that we're not, really honoring our own needs and wants. And sometimes that's because we don't even know what our needs and wants are, if those needs and wants are okay to have, all that jazz. So one big caveat before I dig into stuff, this is not therapy. This is not to substitute therapeutic advice. So please do not treat that as such. I hope that you take this as education, as a blog from a person who is a therapist and just loves this content and talking about it. So without further ado, let's dig into some examples of areas where you might want to start setting boundaries. So I am going to steal some examples from what is called the Relationship Bill of Rights. I was trying to look up the original author and could not find anyone. So I want to credit that this is not from me. This is something that I have seen in different formats and created differently. And even you can create what we call your own personal Bill of Rights. And anyway, I just wanted to clarify. I did not create this. However, I think it's awesome. And I think there's a lot to dig up in this. And sometimes I go through this with myself and say, hey, where am I feeling like I'm struggling in these areas? How can I, even culturally, there's going to be some differences. So some cultures may feel like certain things are respectful and other things aren't. So make sure you cater this to your culture as well. Okay. Number one, I have the right to say no and to not feel guilty. So I know that sounds silly, but a lot of people struggle with that. And if you're a person and you resonate with that, I would challenge you to say that the next time you have to make a decision, instead of immediately responding, tell someone you'll get back to them if you can. Or say, hey, let me think on that and I'll get back to you, because that gives you the opportunity to really think it through and ask yourself, is this something I genuinely want to do? Will I feel any resentment or frustration if I do this thing? And just give yourself more pause, because you do have the right to say no and to not feel guilty, even if the other person is disappointed or sad or angry that you said no. You totally have the right to say no and to not feel guilty about it. And for some people, that is very, very hard. And so I do want to reiterate that you get to say no. You get to not feel guilty about saying no and having differences of opinion, not wanting to do things, et cetera, et cetera. You also have the right to express your feelings without being criticized. Now, that doesn't mean that the person is going to love your feelings. Like, if you express them, it doesn't mean that they have to agree. They have to love how you are feeling, especially in some really, really tense subject areas. However, it does mean that you have the right to express those without the person attacking your character or judging you or saying that you're a bad person for having those feelings, because we all have feelings and even impulsive thoughts and things that come up for us. And so it's really kind to be in a relationship where someone doesn't just immediately criticize or judge us, especially when we're sharing some of our shadow parts that we might be struggling with ourselves. You have the right to take time for yourself, rest, recovery, to know that some days you're going to be more on it than not. I know for me, there are times that I still kind of push through lack of motivation, but if I'm really feeling stuck, I will give myself some time. I'll be like, hey, I'm going to go take 30 minutes and go do something that refuels me, because I know that if I continue to try to push, I'm just going to be stuck and fighting myself. And it's not good for me. It's not good for whatever I'm needing to make progress in. And also just in general, like in your relationships, to know that it's okay to take time to yourself. Sometimes you spend a lot of time with your partner, and if you're finding that you're getting kind of like grumpy and like, sometimes it's like, hey, we need to just go do our own things for a minute and come back to it. And to know that that's okay. Or, if you want to go get dinner on your own because you have a craving for pizza, they have a craving for tacos, that's totally fine. You don't have to have dinner every night. Like, I think even that's kind of one of those weird things where people are like, if we're in a relationship, we have to have our dinners together. We have to do these things together. We have to watch the same movies. And it's like, you guys are both genuinely wanting to watch different things. Go do that. I mean, there's time for togetherness and there's also time for separateness. And while I think people can be good about the togetherness, I think sometimes they struggle with the separateness, and that itself causes tension and friction in a relationship, even with friendships. What else? You have the right to make mistakes. You totally do. I think for any of us that we're able to make mistakes without criticism or shame is incredibly important. You are human. You're going to make mistakes. It's part of life. And that you're okay with that yourself. It doesn't mean that you don't work on stuff that you struggle with. It just means that you know that there are things you struggle with. You will maybe even consistently struggle with, and that's okay. It's also okay to change your mind about things. I think for some people, it's like they feel like if they commit to an idea or they say, I want to do this thing, that they can't then later change their mind. And while that might be hard for the other person that you're committed to, and you can empathize and understand that that stinks, it's okay. You get to change your mind. And I think it's good to be real versus, go through with a plan that you're like, I actually woke up this morning and feel terrible. Or, I thought I was okay with this idea and then I sat on it for a few days and I really am not. You get to do that. Anybody does. And I know that it's disappointing when a person thinks we're going to do something or we do feel a certain way and then that shifts. But it's important that we hold space for that, because we as humans, we're going to evolve over time. And I think it can be unhealthy if we expect people to stay the same from a place of like fear and desiring that consistency, because we're just like, uncertain that change could be a good thing or can be healthy. I think that's all I have to say about that part. You have the right to ask for what you want. Does not mean you will get what you want, but you totally have the right to have those needs, to have those desires, to express what's coming up for you. You also have the right to end a relationship for any reason or distance yourself in a relationship for any reason. I think for some people, they feel like they have to have a plethora of reasons. And this isn't to say that like it's not important for us to face ourselves in a relationship. If you have a pattern of consistently like going in and out of relationships with friendships or with significant others, because sometimes that is people being avoidant and they're just not really dealing with their stuff. However, sometimes I feel like people don't give themselves permission to think differently than like if I commit to something, I have to do it forever. I have to feel this way forever. I have to be in this friendship forever. And the truth is, I think it's important that you do your best to express where you are in any given moment, and do it kindly. And the biggest part about that is that we're not expecting for people to love it when we change. In fact, they won't. I mean, you can bet on it that people have a hard time when we change or when we feel different than they do. And that's okay. I think that piece too is like, how do we learn to tolerate and be okay with people being upset with us, with people not always loving our change? I think that's truly one of the harder parts about boundaries. It's like, number one, figuring out what a boundary is for ourselves and saying it in a kind way. But for many people, it's the second part that's the hardest. It's the, how do I maintain my calm and maintain my resolve when the person that I really care about is really upset in response, or may even be triggered and like try to attack me, which usually that's from their own stuff, right? And that's hard to not personalize in the moment, but the more that we can depersonalize that and just try to understand why they're scared of our boundary or why they're scared of of us feeling different or whatever it is that's coming up for them they're feeling, usually we can over time create more safety and actually deepen that relationship if we're able to hold space and know that like them being upset is usually about just whatever it is bringing up in them, their fears, change is scary. It is. And so when someone you care about is different or there's change, if you never learned how that could be a healthy, good thing when you grew up, like if that was a bad thing when you grew up, it's really hard to have a lot of tolerance and be okay with it as an adult. And so that person that you're trying to talk to about your boundaries may be internally freaking out, but it's not because of what's going on in the moment. It's because of all those fears and insecurities that are coming up from childhood, which I know sounds redundant, but is so freaking true. So anyway, long story short, if you're starting boundaries, sometimes the first step is, let me get in touch with these areas of tension, and let me look at some of these personal bills of rights and create one for myself and see, are there areas in my life with certain relationships where these are not being honored? And that's a good space or place to start setting some boundaries with that person. I would encourage you to not set all the boundaries at once. So like if you go through this list and you're like, I don't have any of these and these are all tense, first, you're not alone. But second, let's not make all those changes all at once. Let's take it step by step and maybe choose one or two to practice and really like start building your capacity for setting boundaries and start getting to know yourself and building your tolerance for other people being upset with you when you create these changes. Because if you're going from somebody who's never spoken up about these things, it's very likely that the people in your life will be pretty reactive to you initially. And so it will take some time for you to develop and grow to where you build your sense of self and either create new relationships or change the current relationships that you're in. I know that's a lot of information thrown at you, but I think it's really important that we understand this concept of like understanding our own Bill of Rights and the things that we care about and our own values and how that plays into us setting boundaries in our relationships with our partners, with our friends, even with ourselves. That's all I got for you guys today. I hope you are having a wonderful, awesome day. If you have specific questions, please leave it in the comments below. And if you like content like this and want to learn more about attachment, trauma, psychology, mental health, all those fun things, please subscribe to my channel. It truly does mean a lot to me. So I really appreciate it and hope you're having an awesome day. Until next time.